Chosen one, what I'm about to tell you is something most people will never understand. Not because it's too complex, not because it requires some rare intelligence, but because it was never meant to reach them. This message was encoded for you long before this moment, hidden in the quiet spaces between your thoughts, buried beneath the emotions you couldn't fully explain. You've been feeling it building, haven't you? That subtle but undeniable pressure inside you. The moments where everything feels strangely distant. The waves of clarity that come out of nowhere, only to be followed by confusion that feels just as powerful. It's like something within you is dissolving while something else is trying to take form. And no matter how much you try to ground yourself in what used to feel normal, it no longer holds the same weight. This is not random, and it's not something you can dismiss as stress or fatigue. This is not you losing control or losing yourself. This is something far deeper. This is you being rewritten at a level most people never even become aware of. There is a structure beneath everyday reality, a pattern that keeps people looping through the same identities, the same emotional reactions, the same limitations, without ever questioning them. But you were never fully asleep inside that structure. You've always sensed that something didn't quite fit, that the role you were playing wasn't entirely yours, that there was more to you than what the world reflected back. And now that feeling is no longer subtle. The identity you've been carrying is beginning to collapse, not because you've failed to maintain it, but because you've outgrown it completely. What you're experiencing right now is the beginning of a shift that cannot be reversed. It is a release, a dismantling, a kind of interruption that feels both unsettling and undeniable. And once this process begins, it does not ask for permission to continue. There is a kind of pressure you've been carrying lately that doesn't seem to have a clear source. It's not just about your external circumstances, and even when things appear stable on the outside, this feeling doesn't go away. It feels internal, almost like something within your own system is trying to move, to push something out that has been sitting there for far too long. You might struggle to describe it, but you know it's there. It shows up in your emotions, in your thoughts, in the way your energy fluctuates without warning. What most people don't realize is that the subconscious mind holds onto identities long after they've stopped serving a purpose. It builds them through adaptation, through survival, through the need to belong or to cope with certain environments. Over time, those identities begin to feel like who you are, even if they were never a true reflection of your deeper self. And now, something within you is no longer willing to carry that weight. The identity that helped you navigate your past is beginning to break apart. Not because it was wrong, but because it has completed its role. This is why your emotional state feels unpredictable. This is why things that once felt meaningful now seem distant or unclear. This is why you find yourself questioning aspects of your life that you once accepted without hesitation. You are not becoming unstable, you are becoming aware. And awareness changes everything, because once you see beyond something, you can no longer fully return to it. There comes a point in every deep transformation where the old version of you begins to fall away, and it rarely happens in a dramatic, single moment. Instead, it unfolds gradually through small realizations that accumulate over time. You begin to notice that certain things no longer feel the same, even if they haven't changed externally. Situations you once tolerated start to feel unbearable. Conversations that once felt natural begin to feel forced, and the roles you used to step into without thinking now feel unnatural, almost like you're observing yourself from a distance. This can be unsettling. because the mind interprets this shift as a form of loss. It tries to hold on to what is familiar, even if that familiarity no longer aligns with who you are becoming. But what is happening here is not loss in the way you've been taught to understand it. It is a form of liberation that doesn't always feel freeing at first. Something that was never truly you is being stripped away, layer by layer, so that something more authentic can emerge in its place. Most people resist this stage because it requires letting go of an identity that once provided a sense of stability. But you are no longer able to fully return to that version of yourself because you've already seen beyond it. You are standing in a space between two versions of yourself, where the old no longer fits and the new has not fully formed. And while that space can feel uncertain, it is also where the most important transformation takes place. What you are going through is not limited to your thoughts or your emotions. It is a deeper recalibration that involves your entire internal system. Your subconscious mind is beginning to release patterns that have been stored for years, patterns that once helped you navigate certain experiences but are no longer aligned with where you are headed. When this kind of release begins, it doesn't always feel smooth or gentle. It can create a sense of internal turbulence, where your energy feels inconsistent and your reactions seem unfamiliar even to you. You might feel drained without understanding why, or disconnected even in situations where you used to feel engaged. Certain triggers may surface more intensely than before, not because they are becoming stronger, but because they are rising to the surface to be cleared. You may find yourself craving silence, distance, or time alone, as if your system is asking for space to process something it cannot fully explain. This is not you falling off your path. This is you being recalibrated to a different level of awareness. The discomfort comes from the release itself, from the resistance of patterns that have been held in place for so long. But beneath that discomfort, something important is happening. You are beginning to experience yourself beyond the conditioning that once defined you. And as that awareness stabilizes, your entire perception of reality begins to shift in ways you cannot yet fully predict. For most of your life, your experiences have followed a certain pattern, shaped by your beliefs, your choices, and the identity you carried. This pattern created a kind of trajectory, a direction that your life naturally followed without you needing to question it too deeply. But now, that trajectory is no longer holding together in the same way. You may notice that things are slowing down or not unfolding as expected, that opportunities you once would have pursued no longer appear, or that certain connections are shifting in ways you didn't anticipate. It can feel like something is being blocked, like progress has stalled, but that interpretation doesn't capture what is actually happening. The path you were on was aligned with a version of you that no longer exists in the same way. As that version dissolves, the timeline connected to it begins to dissolve as well. This is not a failure of your efforts or a sign that you've done something wrong. It is a natural consequence of change at a deeper level. The direction that once made sense for you can no longer sustain itself because it is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. Even if you tried to return to it, it wouldn't feel the same, because you are not the same. What you are experiencing is not a dead end, but a redirection that requires you to move forward without relying on the familiar structure that once guided you. One of the most difficult parts of this process is the sense of disconnection that comes with it. It's not that you've suddenly stopped caring about people or about your life. It's that your relationship to these things is changing in ways that are hard to articulate. You may find yourself feeling distant from conversations, from routines, or even from aspects of your own personality that once felt natural. This can create a sense of isolation, as if you are no longer fully anchored in the world you used to move through with ease. At the same time, you may not yet feel fully connected to what is emerging, which leaves you in a kind of in-between space that feels unfamiliar and uncertain. This disconnection is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that your energy is no longer attaching itself to what no longer resonates with your current state of awareness. Most people remain connected to their environment because they are operating within the same patterns and expectations. But as you begin to step outside of those patterns, that sense of connection naturally shifts. The space you are in right now may feel empty at times, but it is not meaningless. It is a transitional space where the old attachments are loosening, creating room for something new to form, even if you cannot yet see what that will look like. Amid all the confusion and intensity, there is a quieter layer of awareness within you that has remained steady. It doesn't react in the same way your thoughts do, and it doesn't get pulled into the same emotional fluctuations. It simply observes, understands, and waits. This is the part of you that has been sensing that something deeper is unfolding, even when you couldn't explain it. It has been present in the moments where everything suddenly felt clear, where you briefly understood that this process is not random or meaningless. That awareness has not been loud, but it has been consistent. It doesn't rely on external validation, and it doesn't need constant reassurance. It recognizes that what you are experiencing is part of a larger shift, even if the details are not yet fully visible. As everything else begins to change, this inner knowing becomes more noticeable, not because it is growing louder in an aggressive way, but because the noise around it is beginning to quiet down. What once felt like a faint signal is becoming something you can no longer ignore, and the more you pay attention to it, the more it begins to guide you through this transition with a kind of clarity that doesn't depend on certainty. There is a realization forming within you that may not have fully surfaced yet, but it is already shaping the way you see yourself and your life. The person you were before this shift began is no longer someone you can fully return to. It's not that you have rejected that version of yourself or that it no longer matters. It's that it no longer fits in the way it once did. The habits, the reactions, the ways of thinking that once felt automatic now require effort. And even when you try to engage with them, something feels off, as if you are stepping into a role that no longer belongs to you. This can create a sense of uncertainty because the familiar reference points you used to rely on are no longer stable. At the same time, the version of yourself that is emerging is not yet fully defined, which can make it difficult to feel grounded. But this space is not a mistake or a detour. It is a necessary part of the transition, where the old identity has loosened its hold, and the new one is still taking shape beneath the surface. What is changing is not just how you see yourself, but how you exist within your own experience. And once that shift reaches a certain point, it becomes clear that moving forward is no longer a choice you have to force, but something that begins to happen naturally as you align with what feels true in a way that the past no longer can. There comes a moment in this process where the confusion begins to reorganize itself into clarity, not all at once, but in quiet realizations that land differently than anything before. You may notice that the emotions that once felt overwhelming start to reveal a pattern, and the detachment that once felt unsettling begins to feel intentional. It is in this phase that you start to understand that what you have been experiencing was never chaos, but a restructuring that your conscious mind could not immediately interpret. The pieces begin to connect in a way that feels almost surreal, as if you are remembering something rather than learning it for the first time. The struggles you faced, the ways you adapted, the identity you carried, all begin to make sense within a larger framework that was hidden from you before. This is where you realize that nothing was wasted, nothing was random, and nothing about your journey was accidental. The intensity you felt was not there to break you, but to bring you to a level of awareness where you could finally see the truth of your own evolution. And once that understanding begins to settle in, something inside you relaxes, not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer fighting what is happening. As your awareness deepens, you begin to see the structure that once felt invisible. You start to recognize how patterns repeat, not just in your life, but in the lives of those around you, how certain beliefs shape behavior, and how entire identities are formed without conscious choice. It becomes clear that most people are operating within a system they have never questioned, moving through cycles that feel normal simply because they are familiar. But what stands out most is the realization that you were never meant to remain within that system indefinitely. The discomfort you felt, the sense that something was off, was not a flaw in your perception, but an indication that you were seeing beyond what you were expected to accept. This awareness does not come with a sense of superiority, but with a sense of separation that can feel both freeing and isolating at the same time. You begin to understand why certain environments no longer feel aligned, why certain conversations feel repetitive, and why your perspective has shifted in ways that are difficult to explain to others. This is not about rejecting the world around you, but about recognizing that your place within it is changing. You are no longer here to move unconsciously through the same patterns. You are here to step outside of them and choose differently. As the old identity continues to dissolve, something more authentic begins to take its place. And this emergence does not feel like becoming someone new, but like uncovering something that has always been there beneath the surface. It is subtle at first, showing up in the way you respond differently to situations that once triggered you, in the way your priorities begin to shift without force, and in the way you start to trust your own perception more than external validation. This version of you does not rely on the same coping mechanisms or the same need for approval, because it is not built from the same foundation. It carries a different kind of stability, one that comes from alignment rather than adaptation. You may notice that you feel more grounded in some moments and more uncertain in others, but even the uncertainty feels different, as if it is part of a process rather than something to be feared. This is the beginning of a new way of existing, where your actions are no longer driven by who you thought you had to be, but by a deeper understanding of who you actually are. And while this version of you is still forming, it already holds a sense of truth that the old identity could never fully provide. One of the most significant changes you will begin to notice is the shift in how you approach your life. Where you once felt the need to control outcomes, to push for results, or to force things into place, there is now a growing sense that not everything requires that level of effort. This does not mean you stop taking action, but that your relationship to action begins to change. You start to recognize the difference between movement that comes from alignment and movement that comes from fear or urgency. The constant pressure to figure everything out begins to soften, and in its place, there is a quieter confidence that things are unfolding in a way that does not need to be controlled at every step. This shift can feel unfamiliar at first, especially if you are used to measuring progress through constant effort. But over time, it becomes clear that forcing what is not aligned only creates resistance. Allowing, on the other hand, creates space for things to come together in ways that feel more natural and less strained. This is not about passivity, but about recognizing when to act and when to step back, when to engage and when to trust. And as you begin to move in this way, your experience of life starts to change in ways that feel both subtle and profound. There is a point in this transformation where it becomes clear that what is happening is not something you can reverse or ignore. The alignment that is taking place is not based on temporary motivation or external circumstances. It is rooted in a deeper shift that has already begun to redefine your direction. You may still have moments of doubt or hesitation, but even those moments do not carry the same weight they once did, because something within you knows that going back is no longer an option. The paths that once felt open to you begin to close, not as a form of limitation, but as a way of guiding you toward what is actually meant for you. This can feel intense at times, because it removes the illusion of endless options and replaces it with a more focused sense of direction. But within that focus, there is also a sense of clarity that was not available before. You begin to see that alignment is not something you have to chase, but something that naturally occurs as you become more honest with yourself. And once that honesty is established, the choices you make start to reflect it in a way that feels both inevitable and empowering. As this process continues, it begins to feel less like you are chasing something new and more like you are stepping into something that has always existed just beyond your awareness. There is a quiet recognition that this path was never created in this moment, only revealed as you became ready to walk it. The resistance that once slowed you down starts to fade, not because you forced it away, but because it no longer fits who you are now. Your movements become clearer, more intentional, even without having every answer. What once felt like obstacles now feels like direction, guiding you forward rather than holding you back. And in this shift, you begin to realize that what you are moving toward has been waiting for you to meet it at this level of awareness. At this point, something within you settles into certainty. Not loud, not overwhelming, but steady and undeniable. You understand now that you cannot return to the way you once saw yourself or the world, because that perspective no longer feels real. The patterns, the illusions, the old ways of thinking have lost their hold. You move differently, with more awareness and intention, not because you have to, but because you can no longer ignore what you see. And in that realization, there is both responsibility and freedom. A quiet knowing that whatever comes next, you are no longer moving blindly, but with a clarity that will continue to guide you forward.